In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, the FireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The FireStore, your trusted safety partner.
United Safety's Valor First Responder solutions are built for those who protect us. With durable, ergonomic seating for fire trucks and ambulances, advanced air purification to reduce airborne risks, and a dependable vehicle brake lock for added safety on the job, we provide solutions that keep first responders ready and protected. Valor First Responder Solutions, designed for the demands of the front line.
Hi, Chris McClune here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this edition of our podcast. Today we're going to be talking about pumps, specifically pump maintenance. And I have with me today Andy Byron. I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a second. But you may already be familiar with some of what he has done for us. We have a website called The Rig. It's at www.rigspot.com. And Andy has been writing for us there, not only about pump maintenance, but recently he wrote one about just communication between end users, the firefighters, and the emergency vehicle technicians at the shop. Sometimes we don't speak the same language. So make sure you take a look at that. It's at rigspot.com. But before we get started here, Andy, I was hoping maybe you'd be able to just tell us a little bit about yourself, your fire service career, where you're at now, and some of the stuff you've been doing on the pump side of the business.
Yeah, my name is Andy Byron. I'm from Manchester, New Hampshire. That's where I proudly retired after 22 years of service as a line fireman. And in that time, as being a fireman, I worked for my current company. I worked for W.D. Perkins out of Bedford, New Hampshire, as an EVT, specifically just pumps, water delivery, foam delivery systems. The company has been around since the 80s. That we're proud to say that everybody that works for this company is or was a fireman at one time. We don't have just mechanics. So when we go to the firehouses and work on the trucks next to the firemen and firefighters, we get to talk to them and tactics a little bit, and we can talk the same language. They don't just get a mechanic, and we bridge that gap very well.
So what I wanted to do today was talk a bit about, some of the more frequent repairs that you see, but also try to get a little bit into what end users can do or not do to ensure that outside of preventive maintenance or annual pump testing, they don't have to go to your shop. I'm sure there are a number of things that you see frequently. I'm sure there are a number of things that firefighters are doing that you're like, oh my God, if they would just stop doing this for 5 minutes, they would save so much time and keep the rig in service. So I guess just to get us started from a maintenance perspective, what are some of the most common repairs you're seeing or that you have seen? What are some of those most common repairs that are made to pumps that ride on fire apparatus?
Well, number one, it's the valves. The valves are the most beat up part of the pump and used a lot, whether it be a cross lay or a large diameter one, or one that you don't use all that much and you just open it once or twice in the life of the rig that you have. So valves is number one. The second one that we see a lot of, and especially with the aging fleets out there, the towns can't spend the millions of dollars or even $900,000 to get a rig, or wait the 4 years or less to get them right now with the demand and supply. So we see a lot of plumbing issues. A lot of the metals, even though you have a stainless steel plumbed pump, there's stuff that's regular ferrous metals, black iron. We see a lot of that out there. So we're catching up with a lot of that lately. And lastly, we see a lot of foam. People don't understand how corrosive the foam is. A lot of times they don't flush everything out. And the foam has a different pH than the water, and it does some stuff, chemically and the molecular level to the valves and the plumbing itself. So those are the three big items that I would say right off the top of my head that I see.
When you talk about the valves, talk about what's going wrong there, because when we talk about valves, there are the traditional manual push-pull valves, but then there are electric ones as well. Are you seeing when you're seeing these repairs come in? Are they mostly to the manual valves, the linkages, or are there some that you're seeing on the electronic side as well?
Well, so the electronic ones are still considered the same valve core that's within the plumbing. It's just what's driving it.
Okay.
So a lot of times,
the valve itself.
Yeah, a lot of times it's the seat gets, in this area we're probably 70% drafting up here. There's cities that have just hydrants, but the guys that draft a lot, they get a lot of the minerals and rocks and pebbles that go through and will take out the seat of the valve or scar the ball face. So when that seat goes by the ball face, they don't actually seat again, and they just kind of weep by or under pressure, and we'll see that. A lot of times we catch those at pump testing too.
Speaking of the electronic valves, one of the great things about those electronic valves is that sometimes they can be put anywhere. Is it sometimes a little bit of a hunt to figure out, where the valve is that you're trying to fix?
Yeah, well, we have to trace a lot of times and dive into the pump compartment or what we call the module. The electronic ones are sometimes in a really bad spot. Again, when you're designing your truck, you got to think of who's going to be fixing this 10, 15 years down the road, giving them access panels, giving them other stuff, and be like, hey, we can't do that because sometimes I'm spending 4 hours just to get a valve out, and it takes 20 minutes to overhaul it, and then 4 hours to put it back in.
Wow. What are some of the user behaviors that lead to these repairs? And are these repairs? I mean, you were talking about the seats on the valves and things like that. I mean, that is kind of normal wear and tear.
Yeah.
But are these repairs preventable? And what are some of the user behaviors that are leading to these repairs? You talked about, like you were saying, the minerals and things like that. That's not really the user behavior, but is there anything that the end users are doing that, that they could, prolong the life of some of these things to keep them out of the shop?
Well, one of the things when you're at draft is to make sure you have screens that are in proper shape on your intake devices, whether it be a floating strainer, a bottom strainer, or the actual strainer right at the main intake, where some people have a ball intake valve or a main intake valve. Make sure those are up to snuff. They're good shape. They're not beat up. They're going to stop the majority of the larger stuff to come in. The finer stuff's still going to come in through it. Drafting, I'm sure you were taught 1,000 RPMs, start pulling a draft, put it in pump, make things work. Doing that now, we don't do that because our times have changed. I think I had that in one of the articles I'd written, where the reason it came from was back in the day before we had a electric motor to drive our priming motor, we had to drive it off the gearbox or the chain box or the midship transmission for the pump, and we need those RPMs to spin those vanes. And for some reason, that has stayed in the fire service, and we're ticking away at it. We're telling people, like, don't do that. You can prime with the truck in neutral, not spinning the impeller, and get your prime, and then you can take time and put it in gear. So a lot of times, and people will forget about that it's still in pump. They're working through their vacuum issues, so that wears stuff out. The cavitation, when you're pushing more water out than can come in, people don't get to see that a lot or hear that. Or when they hear it, and they can do that from tank to pump just during their daily check or their weekly check, depending on if they're full-time or volunteer, you can cavitate a pump from just sitting and flowing water. If you have tank to pump open all the way and you have tank fill all the way, you can definitely overrun that 2-inch or 3-inch pipe just sitting on the ramp. And we get calls on it all the time. And a lot of times we tell people, like, knock that tank fill back to less than half, do your pressure checks, do your regular stuff. You will stop cavitating the truck. Cavitation does a lot to the internals of the pump. When we start overhauling and we take them down, we see what's called a cut water. It almost looks like they took a hole saw and drilled half the cut water away. And a lot of times that changes your performance on the truck.
When we talk about user behavior, and especially where you're at, Are there frequent flyers where, something's coming back for the same thing over and over and over again, where you finally just go, I got to go out to the fire department, to the station, to the company, whatever, and see what they're doing every time they're putting this pump in service to get them to stop doing whatever it is that's causing this repair?
Primers. People, love to destroy primers or hurt them from A, lack of use, or B, too much use because they have too much air, a vacuum leak someplace else, whether it be packing, a plumbing leak, the valve we talked about, leaking by. They just, improper waiting too long and hanging on the primer for so long, and there's no lubricant to it, or they don't exercise it all the time. One of the things is guys just give it a pump and that's it, and that's not exercising the primer. That's just making sure the electric motor made noise. So the primer is that's one of the big ones that we get.
Okay. A lot of, we talking about the user behavior and the common problems. A lot of that can be sort of preempted by, a regular preventive maintenance program. Obviously, I mean, it's going to vary by department. I'm sure you see a lot of municipal, a lot of career departments bringing, that are bringing their trucks in and out. I'm sure you see a lot of volunteer departments as well. Sometimes volunteer departments will only send the truck out when it's time to do the pump test. Sometimes you'll go to the department to do the pump test. But there are also things that can be done at the station. Like you were saying, like during their weekly or their shift check or whatever. On the volunteer side, it might be every other week. It may only be once a month. But what are some of those PM items that fire departments can perform regularly to try to keep, again, I know you need your job, but again, to keep these rigs out of the shop. Or keep them. I shouldn't say keep them out of the shop. I should say just reduce the frequency of them going to the shop, so that they can stay in service longer.
So one of the things that we see all the time, and even when I started in the fire service and became an engineer or driver or whatever you want to call it, there was the master drain. Don't touch that. Don't touch that ever. Just leave it alone. We tell people all the time, if it's got a lever, it's got water going through it, open it up and flush it every day, once a week, once a month. Don't put it in pump. Don't use these and flush them at high pressure. Just use the tank water, head pressure off the tank. Tank to pump, open all these valves, open up all of these drains and let them pour out, and you watch on the ground till you see cleaner water. I mean, your tank water is not going to be pristine, but it's not going to be mud coming out of it. It's not going to be that brown, rust color. Just give it some fresh life and move that stuff. When we do pump tests and do pump service on the road, we're doing this for the customers, and a lot of times we're finding that these drains are frozen. They're like, yeah, I'm not going to touch that. I don't touch that because the senior man said don't touch that, and I'm like, no, you can tell the senior man we can move this stuff, especially the main drain and these valves and all that stuff, and then just using those push pull handles. Wipe them down. Get rid of the road grime on them. They don't need to be lubricated with something that's going to be real tacky. We actually switched to a product that's a dry lubricant. So we spray it on, and it turns a graphite, and it turns rock hard, that it doesn't scratch off, and it doesn't collect the road grime that we get. So yeah, just use the products. A primer. In one of the articles, I think I talked about the actual way to flush a primer when you're not using it is we open tank to pump, leave the truck running, put it on the front ramp, and I pull that and I let water go through it for 20 to 30 seconds. So you can hear the noise of the motor. You can hear that it's not dying down. You can watch the water eject out because there's a valve before it gets to the primer. There's the priming motor. There's the electric drive. There's the vanes. All of that stuff loves to move around. And if we let it just sit and get corroded, it just gets, boogered up, and then you just hear the lovely squealing noise, and then you see your lights on your truck dim down, and your primer is dead in the water.
With the PM things that you just mentioned, are there basic repairs that fire department personnel can do on their own. They see something during PM that I mean, we talked about the spray and the lubricants, but is there anything to the if it's not something that they take the truck physically out of the station and to a third party like you, are there things that they can do themselves that are I guess you could say, okay, you could get away with making this repairs, but once you get to this stage, do not touch the pump?
A lot of times we'll tell our customers, like, hey, our gauge froze. So typically when a pressure gauge up in New England area freezes, it sticks at a pressure or it's showing way negative. We'll tell them like, yeah, we can send you out one of these. It's really simple. It's just a matter of undoing something simple like that. If they're comfortable with taking a valve body apart and taking it out of the truck and cleaning it up and doing it the right way, sure, we'll send you the kit and you can do it, or you can purchase it online. Plumbing, if you have a member of the company or the firehouse that can do plumbing work and understands black iron and what to do and how to, what's tight, what's not tight, what compounds to use, sure, absolutely do that in-house. Electronics get a little tricky because every manufacturer has their own different ways, and I'm talking electronics for tank levels, pressure governors, even some of the stuff where valves are controlled by electronics, calibrating them, making sure they do what they have to do, or even just, the foam delivery system. Sometimes they deliver foam and the article I talked about, they thought they were doing the right thing of resetting it, but they were actually just making it simulated flow. And they kept saying, no, we reset it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm going to come see you. I want to see what buttons you're pushing. And that was one of the things like, okay, time out, hang on. Let me help you and understand that.
And that's an example of what you were talking about with that when you're speaking a different language. Now, having answered that question, how often are you fixing department mistakes when they've tried to do something that they got a little in over their head on?
A lot of times we'll get calls like, hey, I tried, I'm giving up on it. You come in and take this over. I'd probably say 4 to 5 times a month we get calls. And a lot of times the customers are good about it. They're like, yeah, I tried. I should have just called you guys right away and just, I don't think I screwed it up too bad, but can you come help me out? And yeah, sure, no problem. And so it's no harm, no foul for us. I mean, we have small departments that have, their operating budget in this year is still $60,000. That includes fuel for the truck, lights and heat for the firehouse. After that, they got to figure out where their money's coming from. Their members probably don't get any stipend, or they may, but so yeah, we understand that. And then, we do a lot with helping with selling stuff to those even bigger cities and bigger municipalities when they want something reconditioned or refurbished. We absolutely do that all the time. We don't have to sell brand new. If we can take apart and sub-assembly, and we had one that we took off an old job and we can recondition it, and it can be a quicker trade-off of me taking that part off or that sub-assembly and putting it on the rig and getting them back in service and saying, hey, I'm just going to charge you the rebuild kit and my labor. I don't have to sell you the whole, assembly, because I've got your old one and I'm going to recondition that one, and I'm just going to, move it on down the line and help out the next guy. So we do that a lot too.
I was asking that because I do remember a bunch of years ago, I was doing my front brakes, and there were 2 bolts on the caliper, and one of them I stripped it. I mean, I just didn't line it up right. I stripped it, and I took it. I ended up taking it to my mechanic, and it was such a common repair. They just had to put a Healy coil in there. Yeah. I remember the mechanic going, "We fix people's mistakes all the time. Yeah. Don't worry about it. We fix them all the time." So, but based on that, if fire departments, individual fire companies, or maybe some of the, sometimes, a fire department may still have its own shop, even though they send the trucks out to you sometimes. Are there certain part pump components that fire departments should keep in stock because they are wear and tear? I mean, getting back to the valve seats, are there things like that they should keep in stock? Or is it not such a hot idea just given, if it's a career department, it probably the pumpers are the pumpers, they're done to a spec and things are going to be the same across the board. Maybe if you have a fleet with a lot of mixed component apparatus components like the pump, maybe that wouldn't be. But I mean, just I guess in a general way, are there some parts that they should keep in stock regularly?
Well, they can, and again, it depends if some small companies, fire companies, and fire departments up here, they may have 3 different apparatus manufacturers that they have rigs built by, a local company around here, or some of the bigger ones. That when they spec them, if they have the same brand valve in all 3 trucks, then when you're doing your specking, even though you have to shop around, you have to get the best deal for your community as far as cost. You can say that, hey, I just want Akron valves, and that way that takes your parts, and you can say, well, I know that I have 3-inch, 2.5, and 1.5 Akron valves, so why don't we keep 2 kits each in stock? My tank level displays, they're all FRCs. Okay, so let's keep some parts for those. The sending unit, the little transducer, let's keep those in stock. That type of stuff. Screens or even anodes in the truck. Depending if you have which brand of pump you have, you could keep the anode in there. Definitely screens, your intake screens, those are sacrificial on your main intake into the pump on your bigger pump. So, keep those in stock. Gaskets, that type of stuff. Nothing, I wouldn't say they need to stock everything that they have under the truck, just stuff to get them by and out of a jam, in a few hours.
You were talking a minute ago about some of the electronics and how that might get a little challenging. And this is, as much for my own knowledge as much as anything else here. When you have a multiplex truck, does that multiplexing do anything with the pump, or is that independent of the multiplexing? And if so, do you get into those repairs as well? Because that really starts getting into some technical stuff.
Yeah, the multiplex does get into the pump area, specifically for what we would call pump shifting, but in my world, it's called lockup. So the multiplex has to see that the human put the truck in neutral. It's probably going to see an air difference from road to pump, and then it's going to see that the human put drive. So that should lock everything up and make the sequences, and the operator should see 4. So we're on direct drive. If that multiplex sees anything but that, it's going to go to 5, or it's going to give you some error code. You may not get your pump panel lights. So, depending on how they're programmed, you can, your pump panel lights will come on. That's controlled by a module now. So they call it a PDM, a pump module, basically, depending on whose multiplex you're playing in. What happens with those technically when that module, when I diagnose it and I have a program where I can only listen. So the terms that we use is like, I'm listening to the system and I'm watching it talk to the different modules. And I know that it's telling the pump module to turn the pump on and do everything. Well, it doesn't do it. And if I diagnose it far enough down and I get to it that I need a new pump module, I can't just go off the shelf and buy one. Those have to come from the original OEM pre-programmed. So I have to call the original OEM and say, hey, I've got this truck, serial number this. So, I can't just get one and say program it myself. That's very much locked down for good reason, because I think if they left that wide open, there's a lot of changes that could happen, and a lot of bad things could go wrong with the truck.
I remember back when and it may have changed now. I haven't taken a pump class or pump school, like a pump certification class, pump operation certification, in a while. So it may have changed, but pump 1 and to an extent pump 2, there was always kind of a backgrounder on the pump. This is the difference between a single stage and a two stage. If you have a two stage, this is what happens when you go from one stage to the other, and just kind of some backgrounds on not the nitty gritty on how they work, but just a background on how they work, so you kind of have an idea of what's going on behind the pump panel. When you're standing there, pumping at a job. But and they do that, before they get into, okay, here's how you operate the pump. What are some of the items from those pump backgrounders that operators should still be keeping in the back of their minds that will help reduce out of service time due to maintenance?
Well, one of the things is, the systems that live around the pumps. So you have pressure reliefs or intake and discharge. How do they operate? Are they the electronic style? Are they the physical manual ones? How do they fail? How can I get around them? If I'm at a job working and all of a sudden an external pressure relief opens up for whatever reason, because we took a spike. And a lot of times, because those are a piston style, they sit up against the face of a seat. They never get exercise. And when they do, that piston has like a glued on or vulcanized rubber. 99% of the time, half is going to stay on the seat, half is going to stay on the piston. When it comes back closed, it's not going to close. So you're going to be losing pressure. How do I stop that? Do I take the truck out of service right away? Pressure governors, where we're talking the electronic style, it dumps out on one side, on the RPM side. Am I out of service? If it dumps out on the pressure side, well, no, I'm not technically out of service. I just won't have the truck taking care of the idle settings or the RPM settings for myself. Really what it comes down to is all these systems have a failure point. How can I get around them and still keep the truck going and rocking and rolling, either at the fire as the water supply, or the attack truck, or when we get back to quarters, like, all right, I got to Band-Aid this till I can get the part changed out, call my vendor, schedule it, or get them in here. So, the failures and the workarounds are big for me. And understanding, really what is going on with those systems and how do they, how they tick. That's basically, one of the failures or ways you can figure out your failures.
Thinking about repairs, have you had any challenging ones recently where you really, it made you scratch your head but it was a good feeling in the end once you were able to properly diagnose it and repair it?
I'm winning as of Monday. Department of Massachusetts has a rig, spare rig. They froze it. They put it outside. They were doing some stuff. They froze it. Now this truck has had its beating, but they don't have the money to replace anything, so they have to Band-Aid this truck to get it back together. They froze it enough that the bottom of the pump transmission was a heat exchanging device, and it used pump water to cool it. Well, they froze that. That split the tubing in there. The tubing filled the gearbox or the transfer case with water. There was no oil left in there. So it should have had a lubricant, and it wasn't in there. So we said, okay, we got to tear this transmission down because all of these bearings have been soaking in water. I wouldn't drive it. I don't drive it here. Leave it here. Let's take care of it. It went down the route of when we got the transmission to get it off, it didn't let go of the pump impeller. So that meant we had to get the pump impeller and parts of the transmission down. And when that came down, we found the check valve from the tank to pump into the impeller, and probably about this big when it should have been this big. So that turned into a complete overhaul. Then when we were in there doing more work, we found some structure stuff that they had to correct. Yeah. And then, yeah, it was fun. It was one step forward, 9 back, and we finally, got everything back. Matter of fact, it's going to get pump tested Monday, and they'll be back in service with, that truck that they're going to try to get 8 years out of. And again, coming back to, they don't have the money. They have to spend probably 2.1 on a ladder truck right now, and then recover from that, through budgetary processes to buy the next engine and take the frontline engines and put one in reserve, that type of stuff. So yeah, we see that a lot. It was supposed to go smooth, not even.
But that's the reality right now. You like what you just said. I mean that they cannot replace this right now. This has got to be rebuilt and band-aided and put back in service to get them those extra years. Now, speaking of that, I had a podcast that I did with Ricky Riley a while back.
Oh, yeah.
And he we were talking about. And I think it might have been one of the ones where I had him, Ed Rice from Washington, D.C., and Mark Ehrenberg, who at that time was still FDNY. And we were talking about the impact that these lead times and the costs have had on existing fleets. We think about, trying to replace things, but the fleet itself now is being kept in service longer. Repairs just pile up after a while. Have you seen, like, since post-pandemic, have you seen that there are just a lot more older rigs coming in for repair? And as things have gotten a little better, what's the word? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. We said it a million times. Supply chain problems have improved. Have you seen any fluctuation there with the amount of work coming into the shop?
I honestly, I see a lot. When I started working for W.D. Perkins, we did 2 overhauls a year because people would be like, oh, overhaul. You know what? I'm not going to put the money into this truck. I'm going to kick it down the road. We're going to buy a new truck and just, do that. I think for this calendar year right now, I got 3 impeller assemblies sitting on the floor, and we've done probably 4 to 5 more this year. So we're doing the overhauls, and we're, a lot of, the pump performances in there, and we're finding that people are putting the money back into the older trucks because they don't have a choice. The other thing I think is going to start coming up, and we did one just now for another vendor who was a heavy commercial truck shop. They did a frame swap. They did on a commercial cab truck. They did a frame swap. They called us in to help them work around just a pump module, like what should be right, what's not right. And then because it was a major repair, we pump tested it for them, and the truck went back to the department. But they spent a fraction of the cost of a truck and have new frame under it because the body was good, the cab was good, the major components, and they did have to replace a rear end because some of the mounts for the suspension were paper thin, and they're like, no, this needs a new, rear end under it, drive axles and all that stuff. So I think you're going to see that popping up a lot more, especially with departments that have, the Freightliner chassis, the International chassis. There's companies out there that make frames for those. So I think we're going to see that come back. I mean, I remember early 90s when I was still a kid and just getting in. It was like, oh, truck's going out to get refurbed, and it would come back brand new, shiny red. They had treated the frame. They had done, wonders to it. And it was back then $50,000. And it was like, nothing for that.
Have you ever, and again, this is just for my own knowledge, I don't know that it's even possible, but since we're talking about some of these overhauls and things like that, and, you were talking about redoing the frame, you don't ever see people, replacing the entire pump module, do you?
Done it. We've done a bunch of them. Yep. Darleys are easy to do in chassis, where you don't have to take a lot of the stuff away from, walls or anything like that. It can come out, the whole entire volute and everything can come down. Your bigger full body pumps like Waterous and Hale, those have to come out at a truck shop with a crane and everything. Can't be done in the firehouse. And that's what we do. We don't take trucks into our shop. The shop that's just over there, we don't have a big garage where fire trucks are in here. There's none sitting in our parking lot. We take the major components out, load them up into our work vehicles, bring them back here, do our work on the bench here, and then we go back into the firehouse. So the guys at the firehouse like that because they can see us working and doing stuff, and they can crawl under and be like, what exactly is this? What is this? And we'll take 5-10 minutes out of our workday like, yep, grab a creeper, come on under. This is everything you got here.
Well, I want to thank you for sitting down with me today. We covered a lot of stuff. There's probably we could probably take one component of what we've talked about today, and could probably do a whole other podcast on some of these topics. But for today, are there any general takeaways for end users and for those who repair and maintain these pumps on fire apparatus that you just like people to walk away with?
The one thing with the end users, I would say, if you have a pump that has a packing material in it, understand that what your drip rate is, what it should be. Technically, what we do is 1 drip a second, and if you let it get away from you, you're going to end up doing a lot more damage. Lower portion of it. We see a lot of water entering into the transmissions of the pumps because a lot of it is packing is not set right, and water gets by the oil seals. So if you have that style pump, make sure your drip rate is spot on. Do you know how to adjust it? When can it not be adjusted? That type of stuff. And for the technicians, EVTs, man, go to the schools. Spartan School is on my priority list this year to get out there, get the education, because stuff is changing almost yearly now. You've got newer governors out there, even though it's the same box, but there's new programming stuff to it. Go to the manufacturer classes. I've been to all of them, and they're fantastic. Those guys are great. The resources and the relationships you can build with a person in face to face and see all that stuff, let alone your classmates. I think my first school I went to at Hale 10 years ago, I still talk to guys and keep up with each other, and we trade stuff back and forth. Like, hey, do you have this part? Yeah, I got it. Okay, can I buy it off you? Yup. You get those relationships and stuff, and you help each other out.
Perfect. Again, well, Andy, again, my thanks for sitting down with me. I hope to have you on again. Like I said before, rigspot.com, Andy's most recent article is about, improving the communication between the end users, the pump operators and the technicians that you're talking to. Often we do speak a different language. So bottom line is, like you said, you're like, well, slow down, don't touch another button. I want to come and look at what you're doing. And it could be as simple as that. That's almost like, on the fire ground, you're talking back and forth, and finally the incident commander goes, stop. Let's have a face-to-face. And then you work it all out. So that's going to be that is on rigspot.com, www.rigspot.com. Again, as I say at the end of every one of these, if there are topics that we have not touched on that you would like us to touch on, let me know. I'm at chris.mcloon@clarionevents.com. All of our podcasts are archived on our website at fireapparatusmagazine.com/web podcast. So please, if there's one, they're all there. So if you remember who we were talking with, go there, take a look at it. They're all right there. So again, this has been Chris McClune with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment, together today with Andy Byron. Have a good one and stay safe. Thanks again, Andy.
Thank you.
In firefighting and public safety, reliability is key. For over 20 years, TheFireStore has equipped first responders with trusted gear featuring brands like MSA Carnes for helmets and Seek for thermal imaging cameras. Stay prepared. Visit thefirestore.com today. The Firestore, your trusted safety partner.
United Safety's Valor First Responder solutions are built for those who protect us. With durable, ergonomic seating for fire trucks and ambulances, advanced air purification to reduce airborne risks, and a dependable vehicle brake lock for added safety on the job, we provide solutions that keep first responders ready and protected. Valor First Responder Solutions, designed